Hello, and a very warm Yorkshire welcome to a brand new and exciting fifth season of Raising the Roof. I'm Nick Atkin, and you're listening to the podcast that brings together business leaders and industry experts to unpack the big topics that are shaping both the housing world but also the wider world outside. It's absolutely fantastic to be back, and even better to be doing this latest season from our shiny new podcast studio here in the heart of Yorkshire at our workspace in Leeds. And I'm especially excited about our first guest of this new season. We've been working hard to get her on this podcast. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I absolutely love Amazon. And my family will probably tell you that I'm absolutely their biggest customer. Barely a day goes by without an Amazon delivery to the Atkin household. And indeed, there are 3 arriving today, so you get 3 for the price of 1. What we do know about Amazon, it's the place that you go when you need something delivered tomorrow, or in some cases later today. But behind the scenes is Amazon Web Services, and this basically is the world's biggest cloud platform. It's quietly powering the apps, the websites, and the digital services that millions of people rely on every day. It's the unsung hidden hero behind many of the services that we receive. So joining me in the studio today is Leanne Hurrell from Amazon Web Services, and we're going to be diving into one of the biggest opportunities for organisations right now, and that's the power of data and how to harness this properly to deliver truly great customer service. Now, Leanne's job, I think it's fair to say, is huge. She leads Amazon Web Services regional public sector strategy here in the UK, and she supports councils, health organisations, education and not-for-profits, as well as many others, all part of the role of keeping vital services running. So Leanne, it's absolutely brilliant to have you here on Raising the Roof. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Yorkshire.
Thank you for having me, or asking me.
Absolutely our pleasure. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of data, let's just sort of zoom out a little bit, because we know that technology has evolved massively in recent years, and I know just before we came on the podcast we were chatting about that. But, you know, we've gone from the early days of the internet, which unfortunately I'm sad enough and old enough to remember those days, right through to where we are now, which is standing on the edge of what many are calling an AI revolution. But to understand the scale of the opportunity ahead, I'd like to start with some of the basics and particularly help our listeners understand why data has become more important than ever. You know, many people refer to it as the new gold or the new oil. So, you know, the organisations you work with must generate just monumental amounts of data on a daily basis. And so I suppose I'm really interested from your role, how are the best organisations ensuring that they're collecting high quality data and using it really well?
So, well, firstly, it's a great question. And I would say from my own experience, no one organisation is doing it the same way. So if you wind it back a little bit to how are they doing what they've got in the best way, most companies or most organisations, you know, in my remit, didn't even really know the value of the data that they had historically. So there's been a huge amount of focus across public sector to firstly understand what they've got. And then there's been a whole question mark over, can you monetize what you've got? Do you need everything that you've got? And looking at how that data is then governed. This is like the historical stuff. So some of the better organisations that I think are ahead of the game slightly, they have really strong governance frameworks around data in place. And that doesn't happen overnight either, because you've got to win the mind share of the folk that are responsible for that data to be bothered about how it's governed.
Yeah.
So some of that talks to culture, which no doubt we'll come on to later on. And then you've also got the kind of quite open acknowledgement that if organisations continue to silo their data as well, so if you put it in the context of local authorities, I'm in the planning department, so all my planning data is mine. You're in the maybe rent collection department, and all of your data is yours. But actually, if we bring that data together, what an amazing bunch of insights we may see. historically, organisations have not been structured in that way, and the silo mentality has meant that data is also siloed. So going back to the data governance frameworks, that's also smashing that apart. But none of it has happened overnight. There is no magical formula that has all of a sudden made organisations wake up and say, oh, actually, this is what this beautiful piece of data is going to deliver and drive. I think some of the encouraging signs that we have seen as a hyperscaler and as a tech organisation is that organisations are more bothered about kind of the value of the data that they've got. And I don't mean that from a monetisation perspective, but I mean around there's certain data held on myself.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean that's going to benefit me as either a citizen, a friend, a car driver, a taxpayer? What does that actually mean to the human or to the individual? And I think public sector is so cognizant of that fact now that that's kind of fueling the need to change the culture, change the data governance. That was a very long-winded answer.
No, it was great, and I wanted to unpack some of those bits. I mean, certainly it was interesting what you said right at the end there, that the public sector has really started to understand the importance and value of this. And do you see that across the piece, or are there some parts of the public sector, or indeed the private sector, that are better at this, without naming any companies? But are there some areas that are better at this than others, and what's driving that? Is it leadership? Is it as you said, data governance? Is it just people understanding and listening to what you're sort of advising them? What of course you're going to say
I'd
the
love
latter.
to say it's because of what I say.
Definitely claim the latter. But what's because we have been in a position for quite a while, and particularly my world of housing. We've had certainly an issue where we haven't valued the data that we've got available to us. So I'm just really interested in terms of what's got people to shift their mindset.
Leadership, definitely. Leadership plays a huge part. So, and it isn't necessarily like top down, crack the whip, you'll do as I say. But when leadership believe that the data that their organisation is holding about whatever it is that they want to serve or support or whatever their mission is, that definitely drives a step change in what they're then going to do with that data. If I look at, if I take the not-for-profit space specifically, not only are they typically the most resourceful when it comes to cost saving and what they do with their resources and how they apply their resources, but I think I've seen some phenomenal examples in the not-for-profit space where they have embraced using data in a different way. And to put that into context, there's one of our customers, the Bat Conservation Trust, and I urge you to look at their website. They used machine learning to capture 90 million bat calls.
Wow.
Now, to someone who's not a bat expert, that might not sound like incredibly exciting, but as a result of collecting that data, they've managed to protect 4 native bat species in the UK, which is I'm a bit of an eco-warrior. So for me, I love that story, but that's another way where they have harnessed the data that they would naturally have collected anyway, but in a different way to drive a very, very different outcome. It's fueled by their mission. But again, from the top down, their leadership was all about what's the technology available that could help us, evolve as an organisation, but accelerate and fuel our mission.
Right, okay. And just on this, and because you're talking there about how organisations change their mindset, but also how they transform their approach as well. And I saw that you spoke at an AWS event where data was described as the cornerstone of customer service transformation. So whilst bats might be a customer of ours, particularly for building new, they're not always ones where we go. So if we apply that to customer service transformation, can you unpack that statement a little bit more for us? And particularly, for those skeptics who might still be thinking, well, my data's not clean, or I can't really access it, or I know best in terms of what our customers want. Why is data now the foundation for modern services? What's changed? What's different?
Well, so at the start of this podcast, you talked about being an Amazon user. So thank you very much.
Yeah, big customer.
Big customer, which is even better. Keep the share price up. But if you think about you as a consumer, so as you're buying from Amazon, you're also being given personalised recommendations.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're maybe being told, oh, you've bought this before, would you like that?
Yeah.
So your entire experience is now customised and personalised to Nick, because we know that you might want to buy that random grape cutter at 3 o'clock in the morning.
How did you know that?
It's probably the same as my one. I got one in pink. So that personalisation, you know, so put it again in the context of Leanne as a citizen. If I'm being told, oh, actually, do you know in your road the bins are being collected on this day rather than that day? Well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Essex County Council. I'm really pleased that I know that. So my expectation as to what the data is going to deliver for me isn't necessarily fixated on, oh, they've got data on me. My obsession is, oh, they're going to make my existence a bit better because I know stuff quicker. They're telling me stuff that's pertinent to me in a very proactive way. So I feel like data is now driving proactive engagement rather than, oh, I don't know when the bloody bins are going to come out. I'm going to have to get onto the website or make a phone call. So everything about that is personalisation, customisation, and basically just creating a very, very different outcome, but hopefully a positive one. Secondly, I think data, when used in the right way, is enabling organisations, and I learnt this acutely when I joined Amazon or AWS, that it's all well and good to have a big voice and a big opinion, but actually a lot of the data that is out there, if it's collected in the right way and an organisation applies it in whatever, you know, whatever their mission or purpose is, decisions can be made in the right way using data. And it's not just because you've got a bigger voice than me, although you'd be hard pushed to. So do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Kind of data's enabling organisations to make the right decisions based on historical data, but again, being proactive and enabling them to make decisions that pretty much are going to revolve the way in which they deal with whatever their customer or user or resident or citizen or tenant is. Just, it's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's fascinating you say that, because certainly a lot of the stuff that has helped really shape my approach to what we're doing here at Yorkshire Housing has been from my personal life, my home life, and I look at, you know, how I shop, I look at how I make significant purchases, and a lot of that is down to the fact that the information, as you quite rightly say, is driven to me in terms of knowing my habits, but also it's the fact that it's frictionless as well in terms of really easy to do that. And you know, another great example of a big purchase that many of us make now in a completely different way is buying a car, where you know you previously had to go and argue with somebody in a cheap suit in a car showroom. Apologies, any car dealers out there, but whereas now, you know, a lot of that is just simple sort of click and go based on recommendations. But a lot of this is around data and data storage, and I know one of the conversations that people have is, you know, do you keep your data on premises, or do you sort of put it in the cloud and and I suppose it's that whole thing of you know, helping people understand really. So can you explain in simple terms about cloud data, and particularly why it's so significant? Why is that really helped drive the approach that AWS does, and how does that help you support the organisations that you work with?
So I could talk for hours on that very topic, but I won't do, and I won't turn this into a sales pitch either. But if you think about organisations now using data to evolve, using data to provide a very, very different type of service, which we've just touched on, the reality is that all that's really going to mean is that there's going to be even more data. So as I customise it for you, I'm going to have even more data about Nick. So actually, the move from on-prem into the cloud, like AWS Cloud,
great advert.
Exactly, yeah. But if you put it, we use I think it's a great analogy that cloud usage is almost, or moving on to the cloud is almost like electricity. So when you want the light on, you switch the light on. When you don't want the light on anymore, you switch it off. But you only pay for when that light's on.
I love that analogy.
And with cloud technology, it's exactly the same. So you're only using the resources as and when you need them. So as your data demand gets ever greater, if you were in the on-prem world, you've got to make that infrastructure like forever resilient, forever scalable, forever elastic. And that's expensive. And it's also a huge burden on the IT teams to ensure that that on-prem environment is forever ready, whatever the outcome is. We've had some, again, in the not-for-profit space, cancer research, whenever they do their Stand Up for Cancer campaigns, there's like an avalanche of demand, hopefully donations coming in and interest. They could never scale that out in the right way in an on-prem environment. So they migrated their services over to cloud, drove down cost, become super optimized in order to keep that cost down as well. So if you take the electricity analogy, I could keep collecting loads and loads and loads of data on Nick to enhance your very existence. But if I have it in the cloud, I can make it available wherever I need to make it available. But it's still my data as the customer.
Yeah.
So the hyperscalers, in the AWS context, we're not going to touch Nick's data, but we can keep it safe and we can store it and it can be accessed when you need it at a very cost-efficient point.
I mean, that's fascinating. And that, I have to say, is the best description of cloud data I've ever heard in terms of that light switch and you switching it on and using it on and off. I'm going to absolutely steal that with pride and use that elsewhere. But I suppose that's great about how you get the data, and it's great about how you draw it down. I suppose what I've seen is organisations that have really focused on data, but all they do really with it is produce sort of reports on dashboards. And I'm really interested, and I'm sure many of our listeners will be interested in terms of what the difference is between simply having that data and using it well, and particularly how the best organisations that you work with are using that to improve the quality of the customer service offer and really driving that change through a business. So again, you mentioned about cancer research, and that was really interesting about Stand Up to Cancer. You think, actually they get bombarded with sort of, transactions and sort of web hits, and you can't plan for that and work for that. But I suppose I'm just really interested, just any examples you've got or any tips that you've got for our listeners who may say, we've got our data, we've got it in the cloud, but how do I now use it to improve customer service?
So we are working with a local authority who they collect loads of data on the fact that they've got tenants where English isn't their first language, but they have a tenancy agreement. So what would typically happen is they would keep ringing into the council office to speak in their chosen language, to request a copy of their tenancy agreement in their own language, or to even have it explained because they don't understand it. So that data was all there. What this local authority have done is then thought, actually, we've got this amount of demand over tenancy agreements not being in the language of the tenant. Yeah. That's kind of not ideal. So let's provide a translation service proactively. So as the tenancy agreement is given, it's actually given in the person's chosen native language. Now, that's proactive. Again, it goes back to that, you're looking after me as a tenant and a citizen. But they use the data to drive an actual outcome and an action. Yeah. So it was very, they've started to look at it proactively, again, rather than just static reporting. Other organisations, particularly in the education space, we've had examples whereby they've baked in new ways of using that data within their workflows. So some of that could be in the context of a particular piece of curriculum is always challenging to every student. And I haven't got the exact example as to what that is in the national curriculum.
It was languages for me. Any languages.
Basically, it was all everything for me. I wouldn't say I'm the world's best academic by any stretch of the imagination. But again, using that data in a proactive way and understanding that, oh my God, we seem to have challenges in this one subject, in this one chapter every single time. Well, let's change it. Yeah. But let's change it in the context of the data that we've collected from the subjects that really resonate with students, particularly in the SENS area. Yep. What does that look like? So organisations that are embedding actionable insights from the data that they are collecting, I think are using it really, really well. And again, it's helping their organisation to evolve at the same time. Not super fast either, right? But at a speed that the organisation is content with.
Yeah, and I mean there's some great examples there of how you can use data to understand what customers really need rather than those assumptions. And I suppose I am interested in that because many businesses still assume they know what customers need as opposed to what customers actually
Yeah.
want. And I suppose my sort of thinking around this is what are the pit not so much what are the pitfalls, because I think it's pretty obvious what the pitfalls are, but how do you prevent yourself from slipping into that mindset of assumptions over data led decisions?
Well, a guy that I done some work with he's from the NHS. He gave a brilliant quote for me that has really stuck in my mind forevermore, particularly since working at AWS in the context of data. And his quote was, "The value is in the action, not the collection." And actually, when you keep that kind of thought at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about what you do with your data, it does stop you falling into bad habits. Because actually, if all you're going to keep doing is collecting data and doing nothing with it, what's the point?
Yeah.
Particularly if you are in that on-prem environment, so you're collecting more and more cost. There's actually no point, and organisations will die if they don't evolve. And public sector, whilst their organisations may not die in the context of private sector, they're still wanting to win the hearts and minds of the people that they serve, because kind of that's what they're there for. So for me, a lot of it is looking at data with more than one lens as well. So it's not just qualitative data collection, it's making data qualitative and quantitative, again, to drive a very, very different outcome. And this goes back to the point I made about use the data to actually make decisions, and not just because you've got a louder voice or I've got a louder voice. We're moving away from organisations making decisions to do things in a certain way because Fred said.
Yeah.
Actually, when you look at, I don't know, maybe behavioural data, particularly in the context of, say, a contact centre, where the demand, we've moved, thankfully, away from the days of, press 1 for this, 7 for that, and then you're just in like an IVR loop, which was painful for everyone. We work with a not-for-profit again, but an organisation that provides incredible services to individuals who are contemplating ending their life.
Oh, God. Right.
And actually, we are using some of the data that's collected as part of the contact centre environment to assess the sentiment of the agent. How are they feeling? Do they need extra support? Preemptive other measures based on other data that's been collected around individuals that might have shown distress signs, and there's maybe 4 or 5 other angles that you could share with that individual. So again, being super proactive, collecting that behavioural data to drive a different sentiment and a different outcome. But it's so powerful. But I think unless you acknowledge that the days of old of simply collecting data, in my opinion, they've just gone.
Yeah,
and the organisations that are not moving on will just be left behind. And there's loads of others out there that can just trot on by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what you said about the public sector, we know they're under acute financial pressures. So anything that means that they're not getting repeat requests from residents or customers, absolutely a bonus. But I also, you can look at that from a point of view of the sentiment analysis. We've done some work and we've had sentiment analysis running across our contact centre, and it's really interesting because some of our customers will say that no, they're happy with everything, but the sentiment analysis shows that they're not. So we've done some ringbacks with other sort of colleagues, and that's unearthed a whole raft of issues that would have previously gone unnoticed because somebody says everything's fine when actually it isn't. So,
but you can flip it the other way as well. So I guess you can also use that data to retain your contact centre staff.
Yeah.
So in terms of employee satisfaction as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And making sure that people maybe who have different skills are actually servicing users, consumers, citizens, residents in a different way, and they're going to get a kick out of that, so then they want to stay within the public sector as well, which is a huge pull. And a benefit that I think sometimes gets overlooked when you're using data in the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think certainly our contact centre is no different to many others, where it's almost like a sort of test bed and an area where people are able to work out where they want to further their career. And we've had some real rising stars come out of our contact centre who've gone on to progress their career in other parts of our business. I know a lot of sectors say that poor quality data holds them back, and we've talked about those organisations that have valued data. But there are lots of sectors, and housing's no different, where they've built up decades of data, but haven't always used it to its full potential. What have you seen, Leanne, in terms of the most common themes or barriers that are holding organisations back in terms of data and data quality? And more importantly, for people listening who are going, yeah, I know what that is. How can they overcome that?
Yeah.
What's the pain relief?
So, I think, we've touched on the benefits of cloud, as in move to cloud can help you reduce costs. So I think cloud technology in general has alleviated some of the budget concerns and budget constraints, although we then work with customers to help them understand the difference between moving from a static capital expenditure environment over to OPEX, and that's that could be a whole podcast in its own right.
Yeah, if you can explain the difference between capital and revenue for me, that'd be great.
I can't believe I even said it without stuttering. Legacy systems that don't integrate, that's typically a real stumbling point, and I think it kind of almost stops people. It's like paralysis, because it's, oh my God, the problem is so big, how do we overcome it?
Yeah.
But that's exactly the sort of problem that organisations like AWS would want to get involved in, because they're gnarly, ugly problems that customers need help typically. Moving on, the one that is a consistent thread, and you would have seen no doubt in the press all of the different schemes that AWS have created to address the digital skills gap.
Right, okay.
But cloud skills, AI skills, code skills, developer skills, they are typically lacking. And whilst, I can sit here and talk about the virtues of cloud technology till the cows come home, you still need people within your organisation who want to move. So again, that leadership support from the top down really helps, and the encouragement. And also, there's the digital skills gap, but then there's also cultural resistances. So we've always done it this way, Nick, I don't want to change.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you got to. Yeah. Otherwise, you're always going to be forevermore stuck. That does tend to go away if we've got exec support and exec endorsement on any customer engagement. Typically, we can get over all of those barriers that I've just rattled off. But we provide so much support in the skills area. So we've got a scheme called AWS Restart. And actually, this is available for anyone who wants to explore further, where if you might have had maybe not a fantastic academic start in life, or you've just had a bit of a rough ride, it's a 12-week course where individuals can use AWS curriculum and content to come out with some form of certification. And then they are then given the opportunity to maybe work within our partner network or even within AWS. And that's like one of many. There's a tech alliance that we've done with a university and Deloitte, whereby we're looking to, again, upskill a number of individuals that could then be kind of encouraged to join the wonderful world of industry. But that is a common theme. So you've got the individuals that love working in their on-prem environment, that they can touch it and move it. And moving over to cloud is they can't touch it. They can configure it, and they can go into the console and get down and dirty with kind of code line, but they can't actually go into the data center. And again, it's a mindset shift, but the cultural bit can never be overlooked.
Right. Can I unpack that a bit more? Because I'm with you on this. Culture is massive. It plays a huge part in any organisation's journey. And I think, you talked about the importance of leadership, and you talked before about, your favourite quote was, the value of data is in the action and not the collection, which I'm going to steal with pride as well, that one. But I think in terms of what does that look like? What does a healthy, data-friendly culture look like? And particularly if somebody's listening to this podcast who's in a leadership role, what can they do to help promote and generate that type of culture? What are the best examples you've seen?
So I think I definitely think there was a view, particularly in the world of AI, where folk or organisations believe that we're going to go from being a data, we don't know what we've got, oh my God, don't know where to start, to, oh, we're all AI'd up, this is wonderful, we know where all of our data is. And it's never going to be a big bang. So organisations that acknowledge that it's more about crawl, then walk, then run, then sprint. And that's a much more pragmatic, but you're on a journey then. And then you can kind of pick people up along that journey. And if I put it into the context of myself as an AWS employee, so we talk a lot about AI internally. Yeah. I've gone from, oh, it's just another technology, to, oh my God, it's moving so fast, to talking to loads of customers about changing some of their processes, or I don't know, how they might have moved from, oh, I deal with an inquiry on an email this way, to now that's all automated. A lot about automation and chatbots. But I wasn't really using it myself. So we had a phenomenal training experience.
So you weren't using AI. That's really interesting.
I wasn't, no.
Right, okay,
in fact, I wasn't scared of it, but I just didn't really put it into the context of how it could help me as someone who works in a tech company, which I know sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. Whereas now, I use it every single solitary day, even preparing for this podcast.
Oh, wow.
So we have, internally, we use a service called QuickSuite. And it just helps get the old brain going. Yeah. It gives me different memory prompts that I might not ordinarily have kind of had the time and attention to think about. And we are a heavily driven, so we're a data-driven company, but we're also culturally, we write a lot. And none of our decisions internally are made by a PowerPoint slide. Right. We write a document that is full of data points that helps drive a decision. And we take customers through our culture of innovation quite often. In fact, if anyone wants one of those presentations, I'm available.
Right, okay. We'll put a link on the bottom of the podcast.
But the culture of innovation talks very much about how we collect data to drive a different outcome. And customers, again, that are on this journey, so they're crawling, they're collecting data that says, well, maybe we need to evolve the way in which we drive. And I don't know, put it into the context of a customer service agent. We've got a problem with staff who keep leaving. Well, let's do exit interviews. Let's look at kind of the lead up to some of the individuals that are leaving, and then maybe put something in place proactively to stop that kind of behaviour repeating itself. So you put all of that into a very prescriptive, defined part of your journey. So that's like one of your gateposts. Yeah. And then it's incredible how it just picks up momentum. So I wouldn't even consider getting ready for a meeting now without using AI to help me prepare, help me just feel a bit more in control of my life, because generally I don't know what I'm doing. And thirdly, even how to get places. Like pretty much everyone uses Maps or Google Maps now, don't they? And it's driving a different way to do things and where to go. There was a really, I hate this analogy, well, I hate this term, but everyone seems to use it, that you could have the top-down approach, everything's wonderful, we now know where all the data's being kept, we've got this beautiful inventory, but there's a saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I hate that saying because it just sounds vile. Yeah. But actually, it's so true. So you could have your data in all the right places, but actually, if the people are not ready to start that journey, absolutely, which is why I think the crawl, walk, run analogy is so powerful, because you're de-risking it and you're allowing people to become almost like desensitized to the change because they are part of it. You're taking them together. You're on that bus together. Yeah. And that's where you start to see everything accelerates then. And then once they're in that mindset of, oh, look, we drove this outcome. Right, let's do it again. But let's go for something a bit bigger. Yeah. Everyone, I think, is a little bit proof of concept out at the moment because there were so many POCs. But I do think organisations, particularly public sector ones, have gained enormously from doing proof of concepts around using data in a different way. And we're seeing a lot more of those come to kind of a production outcome. So they're actually doing something intentionally and in real time and then evolving it further.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of what you've said there absolutely resonates with me. And I think one of the things that has changed certainly my life as well as being AI, and that sounds like a very grand statement, doesn't it? But a bit like you, really. You know, I came to it probably 12 months ago. In fact, we had somebody on the podcast who was very, very well qualified in AI, and I remember he really opened my eyes to the opportunities that existed. And we talk about a virus for change in Yorkshire Housing and creating that sort of momentum, but exactly the same in terms of what you've said there. And obviously AI is so reliant upon the quality of the information that it's drawing its conclusions from as well. So the quality of that data is so important. I'm always a glass half full person, so I focus far too much on the barriers. I want to talk about opportunities. That's where I get really excited, because it's not about, as you've said, it's not about reporting information. It's about how you actually use the data to change the services on the ground. We've already touched on AI, but I do want to unpack that a little bit more with you. So, because certainly for us, AI has been the superpower we didn't realise we needed until it's suddenly helped connect lots of things up that previously we were having to work really hard to make sense of. So, in your opinion, how big is the change that you're seeing in AI across public services and indeed private sector as well? Are we, in your opinion, on the edge of a genuine AI revolution, or is this just the next big tech bubble that's going to burst at some point?
So I definitely don't think it's going to burst at some point. I think it's very real. Transformation is happening now. Organisations, particularly public sector organisations, I think are seeing what's happening in private sector, particularly the pioneers within private sector, and are embracing some of that. But I think also this is one of the, I'm an old fart now, but I think in my experience, I've seen technology changes before, but they've never materially impacted me at home, and then I see them in the work environment. But we are all AI'd up anyway, as kind of folks sat at home on a Friday night, doing whatever we're doing at home. We're probably doing something that involves something that is fueled by AI. And I think because we've all become kind of like mini experts, everyone seems to be bringing that into the work environment as well. So for me, it's so exciting, but also I think we need to just consistently remind ourselves that AI is just a tool. It's not the magic wand. It's never, ever going to replace the human. And if anything, I prefer it when I hear some of my customers talk about how AI kind of augments the human capability. Whereas I think if you wind it back about 6 months, a lot of customers were really in fear of their roles. So you go back to this cultural resistance. It was probably an element of fear, like we don't want to change because I'm going to lose my job. When in fact, the organisations that I've had the good fortune to work with who have embraced AI and a data strategy, underpinned by a data strategy, the folk are now doing higher value stuff that's far more emotive and meaningful for them as individuals. So you go back to retaining staff and employee sentiment. And when it's viewed in that way, it can only be an amazing, wonderful thing that we should all be literally embracing.
It's an amazing, wonderful thing that we should all be embracing. That's going to be my new takeaway from today. So
I should have copyrighted.
You should have copyrighted. Believe me, it's too late now. It's out there now. We've reached the part of the episode where I get quite nervous because we give you, our guest, the chance to flip the mic and ask me a couple of questions. So, Leanne, with some degree of nervousness, this is your chance to ask me anything that you might want to know.
So if you had unlimited resources to solve just one housing challenge in Yorkshire, what would you tackle first and why?
Right, okay. For me, that's quite simple. I would eradicate homelessness. And the reason being that a safe, secure home, if you look at Haslow's hierarchy of needs, it's right at the sort of base there. It's a foundation of everybody's sort of life and feeling safe and secure. But also the fact that, as of tonight, here in Yorkshire, there are 4,000 households who don't know where they'll be sleeping tonight. And I think the even worse figure that hides is that within those 4,000 households, there are 3,900 children who do not know tonight where they'll
That's
be
awful.
sleeping, and I think that's why it's for me. It's just the one thing that we need to deal with, and that on top of the fact that in Yorkshire we've got just short of 175,000 people who are on waiting lists at the moment, who are actively looking to find a safe, secure, affordable home. So for me, addressing homelessness, I think that is absolutely the most important thing. If I had unlimited resources, that I would wave my magic wand, powered by Amazon Web Services, of
Obviously,
course,
yeah.
and deal with that. So yeah, that'd be my one thing.
Okay, and then so AI aside, if there was, and being hopeful, you know, our glass half full
absolutely.
mentality, what's the one thing that's happening in social housing right now that gives you hope?
Yeah, I'm gutted I can't use AI. So, but as you've taken that joy away from me, I think as a sector we are incredibly fortunate. We have been given pretty much everything we've asked for. We've got the priority nationally at a national level and at a regional level with our mayors, and that's been underpinned by long-term funding. So we've been allocated £39 billion over the next 10 years as a sector to help build the homes that this country is crying out for, as well as funding certainty. That means we can invest in our existing homes as well to ensure they're maintained to a really high standard and also affordable for people to live in, which is often the bit that gets lost in this. But that doesn't come without a price, and that price is a clear expectation on us to deliver. And I think that's a great problem to have. So I think from me, the opportunity is once in a generation, once in a career, I think, that we've got as a sector at the moment, and I absolutely relish the opportunity to grasp that with both hands and run full belt with it. So yeah, that's where it's at. So to finish, we always like a couple of quick fire questions. And Leanne, I just want you to answer these in a few words and leave our listeners with some final thoughts. So we've done some digging on you, and we always love digging on our guests. And you are, I know, a qualified dog groomer.
I am.
I was told by my colleagues that I was not allowed to bring Madge, my beautiful Labrador, in today for a quick trim. So, but also that you love a bit of karaoke as well. So, if you had to enter a karaoke competition with a dog, I know it sounds bizarre, but if you did, which breed of dog are you choosing, and what duet will you be singing together?
So it would, without doubt, be an Afghan hound.
Oh, nice.
Singing Bonnie Tyler, Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Oh,
only because I could have the hairdryer going and the dog's hair would be going everywhere.
Just like Bonnie Tyler.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. We could tell we're of a generation here. Look it up on YouTube if you don't know what we're on about. And then to finish, a more serious one. If you look ahead 5, even maybe 10 years from now, how do you see data shaping the next generation of customer service delivery?
That's a tough one.
Only a few words I'm giving you as well.
Okay, so I'm hopeful that there will be a hyper-personalised, tailored environment that caters for every human's needs, as varied as they may be and as wonderful as they may be. And I would want the future to be super proactive, not reactive, but with human touch remaining as the essential part of that.
Oh, super proactive with a human touch. What a great way to sort of bring this conversation to a close, because sadly that is all we've got time for. And so it's time to close the door on this episode of Raising the Roof. A huge thank you to you, Leanne, for joining us. It's been genuinely a truly insightful and a good fun conversation as well. And I can't think of any better way to kick off a brand new season. So it's great to be back in the studio, and we have got plenty more inspiring guests and big topics lined up. So if you did enjoy today's episode, please make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. But for now, thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.